Maybe you discovered your husband is watching a lot of pornography. Maybe you caught him red-handed and you feel it is affecting your relationship. Something needs to be done, but you don't know what. You're in the right place. My name is Dimitri Dusha. I'm a therapist and a recovered addict to pornography myself. And I have spent the last 9 years helping men quit pornography through powerful and unique, dare I say, methods that I developed when I was on my own journey of recovery from pornography addiction and healing. And my mission is to help as many people on this planet as possible to find inner peace and joy by healing their deep emotional wounds, which is the secret. But no one tells the secret because no one knows the secret. So it is my job to share the secret, which is not a secret. Please share it everywhere around you. Husband is watching too much pornography. What should I do? I'm not going to tell you what you should do, but I'm going to tell you what you can do if you want to be a good ally for the recovery of your husband, and what you need to understand and maybe let go about to be a good ally. So right now you're probably thinking that this video is going to be about your husband, and certainly it is going to be about your husband, but to be able to help your husband and take action, we need to understand what is the context, what is your husband is actually going through. And so we're going to talk about that first. But before we go to talk about the context of what your husband is going through, we need to talk about what you are going through, because you cannot help your husband if you are yourself in a place of disempowerment and distress. And to understand what you're going through right now, it probably goes through acknowledging how you're feeling. So that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. We're going to explore how you're feeling and your beliefs about pornography and relationships. Then we'll explore where you are and what's your context. Then we'll talk about what your husband is going through, some things you may be aware of, some things may be very foreign to you. Someone who's suffering from pornography addiction, it's a reality that may be very remote from your own notion of reality and your perception of sexuality and perception of the world. And finally, we'll get into what you can actually do to help your husband if that's what you decide to do. All right, so a little bit of story. When I was addicted myself to pornography, I had several relationships, short-term and flings and things like that. And for me, there were always two worlds, the world of relationship and the world of sexual encounters the world of relationships and sexual encounters and pornography were always separate. And I knew that within pornography and relationships, I have to do a bit of work to fit myself into the relationship. And I was happy to do that out of love and devotion and everything I was feeling at the time for these women. And pornography was my own me time and space time to explore sexuality without boundaries, without feeling vulnerable, with no limits, basically. And after that escalated pretty bad, I decided to make these two worlds converge and to explore sexuality with no limits, or to try to merge these two personalities I had and to make my sexuality wholesome and to be a one person. And so I started exploring a little bit of the fetish community in Sydney. I did that for a few months, and after that I met my current fiancée, Caroline, and we've been 10 years in relationship at the moment. Did not meet her at a fetish club, is that what you're wondering? So I stopped going to these places. But we were in a very happy relationship for several years, maybe 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And I stopped watching pornography altogether because my needs were met and I was fulfilled and I was madly in love. I still am. But after maybe 3 years or 4 years within the relationship, I started watching pornography again. And that was puzzling. That was puzzling because I was like, I've got the perfectest woman here at home for me, with me, and I'm going back to pornography. What's happening there? And I lived with pornography within my relationship for a couple of years. And actually it is that in that moment when I realized, like, wow, I'm in a healthy, functional relationship and I still need pornography. What's going on with me that led to a drive to heal and to explore really deeply what pornography meant for me and why I still needed it when everything was going well in my relationship. Which led to me exploring pornography, trying to understand pornography, developing new tools, healing from my addiction, and now sharing these tools with as many men as I can. And today also with women, which is fantastic. So that's a little bit about the context of my story. But let's start with how you're feeling today. You've come to the realization that your husband is watching too much pornography. Maybe it is something that you always knew that they were watching pornography. Maybe it's something you've discovered. But you've come to the realization that this is actually not good anymore, that this is hurtful to your relationship, to him, maybe to you. And so you want to be able to do something about it. And so let's take just the full measure of that, maybe, and let's just take a few seconds, maybe 30 seconds, a minute, just to feel that, just to feel maybe the distress that you're going through, maybe the lack of understanding, just this complete disconnect between that reality of them watching pornography in excess and your reality and maybe your perception of him. Maybe the surprise or the shock that this is of the impact that pornography can have, of that, maybe that hidden side that you're discovering within your husband. Yes, because these emotions matter, and so there's also the negative emotions, although there's no negative emotions per se. Emotions are the messenger. But how do you feel about the fact that your husband is watching too much pornography? If we put it into that format, do you feel distressed or distraught? Do you feel betrayed? Betrayal is probably the most common feeling that people feel when their husband is watching pornography, either in excess or in their back or something like that. Do you feel betrayed? Do you feel disconnected? Do you feel hurt? Do you feel disengaged from the relationship? Do you feel like this is too much work? These are just examples of emotions that you could be going through, but any emotion that you would be facing facing that situation is valid. Anger. What about anger? You may be feeling rage that your husband is watching pornography and watching all these women, men, people in that frame. And that this attention is not going towards you, or that you just didn't know about that. So all these emotions are valid, and they are all welcome. And you can make a note of that if you want. Right now, thinking about that, I'm feeling XXX. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling betrayed. I'm feeling annoyed. I'm feeling like I want to end the relationship. Like, it just can't handle that. It's not possible. It's not even about the work I can put in. It's just like, I just want to leave the relationship. And welcome to that feeling. And you may come to that, or you may not come to that. Maybe the acknowledgement that you wanted to come to that is going to make that it's actually not going to come to that. But these emotions need to be expressed. Otherwise, they're just going to be there lingering and pestering and fermenting inside you and just creating more trauma and suffering. So it's important to let all these emotions go if possible, but at least to express them. And again, before you can be a good ally with your husband, if that's what you decide to do, to be an ally in his recovery, it's important to create the space. Maybe you can go see your friend and tell them about, hey, I'm going through this. Give them a call, go for a coffee, talk to a psychologist, talk to your male friends who would be able to maybe understand or have their point of view, because within different communities, everybody's got different beliefs and views about pornography. So all of these things that you can do to create space for yourself, all of these things that you can do to create space for yourself are really, really important. And they're very much the first step you need to do. And you have all my sympathy in this. I have seen my girlfriend and fiance just go through just the stress of like, what are you doing? And me hiding and all the suffering that was behind that and all the hurt that it created in the relationship and the disconnect. I feel a bit of sadness thinking about that. Yes, so that's the first step, is to acknowledge the emotions. The second step is to acknowledge what you're going through, and going back to this idea of beliefs and values. Is pornography bad? I made a video on that you can watch if you want, but depending on the places where you go, people will have different opinions about pornography. And some people will say, it's awesome. Some people will say, I'm watching pornography 4 hours a day, but I'm not addicted. Fine. Some people will say pornography is awful and it's evil and it's less than human. Some people will say, pornography, I watch it casually. Don't really care about it. It just kills a few minutes, and that's what I do to get inspired or something. So really, depending on your surrounding, your education, your social background, people will have all sorts of views about pornography. And it's important to acknowledge, what are your views about pornography? Is it for you something that is shameful? Is it for you something that is fun? Is it for you something that is the root of evil? It's just a no. It's just, we don't do that. How do you feel about pornography? Do you use pornography yourself? Maybe at times. Is there this very difficult, ambivalent position because he's watching too much pornography and you're watching pornography as well? Maybe in each other's back, we don't know. But you're okay with what you do because it's like once a month, but he's watching pornography every day. And so you want to tell him he's watching too much pornography, but you're watching pornography as well. And so how can that message be passed if you're doing what he's doing, but you're not doing the same thing that he's doing because you're watching less of it? Whatever you feel for pornography, it's important to be clear about that. And the reason why it's important to be clear about that is first to be able to express it if it comes to that. But it's also that whatever value you have about pornography, you are probably projecting that upon your husband right now. So if you think that pornography is disgusting and you know that your husband is watching pornography, you probably find him disgusting. If you feel like pornography is for people who are lost in their lives and your husband's watching pornography, then you're going to feel that your husband is lost in his life. And it's very natural to take a belief we have about something and to project it upon someone who's doing that thing. That's how the human mind functions, by categorizing attributes and things in people into what they're doing. So it's important to be clear about how you feel about pornography, and it can be paradoxes and ambivalences, and that's okay. I like pornography. I think it stimulates people's sexual creativity, but I think it's also damaging. Okay, fine. It's fine to have these two opinions. I'm a very strong feminist, but I also love pornography secretly. Fine, that's okay. Like, pornography objectifies women and also men. We're not going into that right now. But I love pornography and I'm a feminist. That's okay. There's a duality there. There's an ambivalence. That's fine. And so once you know what you're projecting onto pornography, or your relationship with pornography, and what you project on your husband from that, then you're in a position to know where you're coming from, and kind of to remove your contribution from that as well. Or at least to acknowledge your contribution and observe your contribution before doing anything. And if there is any ambivalence or something that makes you uneasy about your relationship with pornography, maybe it's important to work on that as well with a psychologist or a health professional, or me, or anybody who's competent in this, and creating the space to hear you about these ambivalences without judgment. Because we are so prone to judging. All right. And so maybe once you've disentangled your relationship with pornography and you have a clear relationship with pornography, now you're able to start to become an ally. All right, and so the third step is to understand their context. So this is probably the hardest part of the three. And by the way, just before we move into the third section here, I want to say it's awesome. It's awesome that you want to support, feeling emotional a bit. It's awesome that you want to support your partner in this, because it is so easy to be judgmental and to project anger and hard feelings towards our partners. And so for you to be wanting to be an ally means that you care for them so deeply, and that you've come to the realization that you're okay with the situation, that you've gone past the resistances, you've gone past the denial, and you're willing to involve yourself in that. So thank you on their behalf, or thank you on my behalf for willing to actively contribute to their recovery and to their healing. Whew. All right. So the third step is to understand what their reality is. This is probably the hardest thing. If you're not yourself addicted to pornography, this may be a very difficult thing to understand. I remember I had a friend who was addicted to sugar, and his wife said, "Why don't you just stop eating sugar?" All right. Or she didn't say that to him. She said that to me. She said, "I don't understand why he just doesn't stop eating sugar," which makes a lot of sense. If you've never seen anyone going through an addiction, if you've never felt the addiction yourself, then it's like, well, he's doing a thing that he doesn't want to do. How is that possible? Just stop doing it. And it's a very normal reaction. And by the way, I'm very grateful and I'm very happy for him that she didn't go and do, "Why just don't you stop eating sugar, you idiot? Why do you present a fast where you say you want to stop and then you keep on going?" Shaming your husband is the worst possible thing you can do. It goes against everything. It's disrupting the love you're giving to him. It's creating more disconnect. It's reinforcing the shame he's feeling about himself. Getting ahead of myself here, but I just wanted to say that before I forget. This is so important. So what is he going through? When I was addicted to pornography, so how did that feel? Every time I was bored, I wanted to watch pornography. Or sometimes I didn't even want to watch pornography. I just been watching pornography for 30 minutes or an hour, and I'd done my thing, and I'm like, well, what do I do next? And I was a bit bored. I was like, well, you know what? I'll just watch some pornography. So there was that sense of boredom. Okay, this addiction for me spanned around 17 years. So there's different Dimitris going through those phases. But there was definitely boredom. There was definitely, when I started realizing it was an issue, there was a bit of despair. A lot of despair. Because I was like, I'm stuck with this. I don't know what to do. And I'm an intellectual, okay? I was raised in an intellectual family. I've got a PhD in astrophysics. I'm an intellectual, which doesn't mean I'm intelligent. It just means I'm an intellectual. But in that situation, analyzing and using my mind was of no help at all, except at the very end, which I may go into. But didn't matter, had good grades, had a PhD, whatever. That's the mind and any sense of intelligence was of no help. And I'm like, wow, I can't rely on the thing that I like about myself, which is that I perceive myself as resourceful and intellectual, which at the time I thought meant intelligent. And even that failed. I'm like, wow, I'm actually helpless in this. I don't know what to do. And I didn't have the financial means to seek psychotherapy or anything like that at the time. There was no YouTube channel about Dimitri or by Dimitri to help me out. So I was on my own, and there was a lot of shame, a lot of distress, a lot of despair, a lot of not understanding what was happening to me. That I said, okay, I'm not watching pornography, and one day later I was watching pornography again. I'm like, how is this possible? And yes, and also so going into addiction, when we are addicted, we're just going through our life normally until something happens in the day and we get triggered. And then when we get triggered, we're going to think about sex or pornography or whatever it is. And that feeling is not going to go away until that's done. So if you go to work throughout the day and you see a pretty girl in the bus in a short skirt, and that's a trigger, then it may awaken images or flashes or imagery, pornographic imagery, or attraction or desire or anything like that. And this may be difficult to hear if this is coming from your husband, but I'm just depicting you a very raw reality of what it feels like to be addicted to pornography. Then if you've got that trigger, it's not going to disappear. So you're going to spend your entire day at work and maybe going back home, etc., with that trigger and with those thoughts. And one thing that was present for me and that I've seen in my clients as well is that once we get triggered, it's also a physical or a physiological feeling. So for me, for 17 years, every time I was sexually aroused or triggered, it transferred into a pain in the chest, or not a pain in the chest, but a heaviness in the chest and being tensed in the chest. And then you have that feeling for the entire day. And it's actually genuinely physically uncomfortable, and it's a constant reminder that you've unconsciously associated that with sex or pornography. So it's a constant reminder that, hey, you got to do that thing. You got to watch pornography to make it go away. And in the end, it becomes the thing where you don't care about pornography anymore. You just want that feeling to go away. So you just watch pornography in a very mechanical, disheartened way, just to let go of that feeling. And then the day after you get up and something happens, sometimes you just had a sexual dream, a bad dream, stress, something happens, and then you get that feeling again. So it is very oppressing. It is very oppressing. So that's their reality with themselves. And the other reality is that they're in a relationship and they know it really well, whether they're watching pornography in your back or they're actually watching pornography openly. You think it's too much, and apparently they're not so open to finding help, or maybe that's just the beginning and it's awesome. So they are very aware that, and most of the time, they'd be very aware that what they're doing is damaging to the relationship, but they just don't know what to do. The fact that they're watching pornography, it's got nothing to do with how much they love you. And I'm not sure how much they love you, but they can love you so much and still watch pornography. And if there was a pill and we say, just take that pill and your pornography addiction will go, they will take that pill instantly because they're in a great amount of distress and in a great amount of pain, and the addiction is the cause of that pain, but it's also the solution to that pain. Very briefly on that. Addiction is just a symptom. Addiction is just a symptom that then becomes its own problem by reinforcing the behavior. By keeping on watching pornography, they want to watch more pornography, but originally something happened where pornography has created maybe a shock or a strong impression on them, and they've unconsciously decided that that's going to be their thing, that anytime they feel bad in their day, they're going to watch pornography and that's going to make them feel better. So there's 6 reasons why they may not feel good, the main causes for the development of pornography addiction, according to my interpretation. The first one is sexual frustration. The second one is unresolved trauma from childhood. That's the biggest thing. The third one is just because they keep on watching pornography, they're building that tolerance where they need to watch more and more pornography. The fourth one is that their overall life is not very good, and so they're just using pornography as an escape to a better life. The fifth one is stress, and when they need to relieve the stress, they just go to pornography to create that me time. And the sixth one is, I'm not going to, was that 6 already? There's another one. The shame, that they're trapped in that condition because they can't talk about it, because they're ashamed. So if you shame them even more, they're going to trap themselves even more into that scenario. And possibly the seventh factor would be neurodiversity or mental health conditions that make it really cognitively strong for them to watch pornography. So if they're suffering from ADHD or PTSD or OCD or any of these acronyms, then pornography will have a stronger grip on them. So, but I would say mostly it's because there's unresolved trauma and unresolved emotions and emotional wounds that are lingering inside them. And so to find peace from that, whatever they're going through in their day, too much stress, trigger, anything, then they use pornography as a space for me time and as a space to be comfortable and as a space like, also when you're addicted, reality does not feel really real. That's a hard thing to say, but that's what I felt for 17 years. I was a very, very critical case of addiction. Okay, I'm not saying your husband's going through all of that, but when you're being triggered, you live in two realities where part of you wants to have sex or to enjoy pornography, and the other part just wants to keep on going through your day and doing work and doing all those things. And so you're switching between these two realities every second, and it's exhausting. So when they find pornography at the end of the day is just a way to find some me time, some comfort where they can be themselves, they don't have to wear a mask, they can find satisfaction without asking, without being vulnerable, without condition, basically. They can just be themselves unconditionally. So if your husband is watching too much pornography, it's because they're hurt emotionally, and they need time for soothing. And the therapy I specialize in is called ERT, emotional reprocessing therapy. So this is the technique where you go out and dig out those childhood trauma and those emotional wounds and this hurt so that they don't suffer from that anymore. So that is their reality. I'm forgetting a few traits, I'm sure, but I hope I'm depicting that this reality of being addicted to pornography is not a simple thing. It's not just out of sheer pleasure. That they're watching pornography is because they're going through something very hard deep inside. And the worst is that this is unconscious. So they're not even aware of why they're doing it. I know that because I've studied this for 9 years, and I went through my own journey of recovery, and hundreds of clients I've had and all of that. But when I was addicted, I had no idea about what was going on. And the reason why my intelligence had no grip on this is because it's an unconscious thing. So your rational mind has no access to the unconscious. Yes. All right. So from that context, now that you know what they're going through, and maybe let's take a few seconds to just feel that. How do you feel if you create in your mind an image of your husband who is going through all of that, is going through this double life, or this double cognition, this double pathway in his mind of sex and reality? He's, all he's craving for is all comfort at the end of the day because he's gone through a stressful day, he's gone through pain that he doesn't even know exists, but he can see the effect of pain, the distress is going through, the love that he's got for you. How do you feel if you bring up an image of him in that? And this may be confronting, and this may be bringing up some emotions, and welcome to the emotions. And if there's tears coming up, welcome to the tears. If there's anger, go and smash that pillow. If there's a scream, go and scream in that pillow. Break a glass in a way that is safe. Do all of that in a way that is safe and where you're not going to hurt yourself. And that's not in front of your husband. All right. So now is the time. Now that we have all this background, you've clarified how you feel about all this. You can let go of the emotions. You've clarified your beliefs about pornography and the lens under which you're seeing your husband, and you can try and not project so much of that onto him, or at least deal with that in your own little world and take the time that it takes to do that. Could be a phone conversation to a friend. It can be 6 months of psychotherapy. Either way is totally fine. And now that you have a bit of an insight into their reality, now we can think about what can you do to actually help. So the number one reason that people are watching pornography within a relationship is because their sexual needs are not met. And so they're trying to meet those needs in the medium that is pornography. And it can be just that after a while there's a routine that installed itself within the relationship, and that the sex life is not really spicy anymore. And this happens in pretty much all relationships as far as I know. And there's always a conscious effort to be brought into bringing creative sexual creativity inside the relationship. But basically there's three cases. Either the two of you really value sex and sexuality, and then it means that you can build something together and discuss and share your kinks and your ideas and your fantasies and create that bridge. Or second scenario, you're both not very interested in sex. It's unlikely because your husband is watching too much pornography, so he's probably actually really valuing sex and sexuality, so much so that for him that's his first exit point, his first soothing point is sex. So that's his form of comfort. It's not alcohol, it's not drugs, it's not Netflix, it's not video games, it's not social media, it's sex. So he probably values sex. But just to finish on that, if the two of you do not value sex, then your sex life's probably going to die a little bit, and you'll both be okay with that because no one's really putting an effort into fixing that, and you'll be doing other things. You'll be painting landscapes or go to the beach or go to a fabulous dinner or something, whatever. That's going to keep this bond alive in your relationship. The problem is when there's an imbalance where one person does not value sexuality so much and the other one values sexuality a lot. And so they're going to bring all the work to try and lift you up to their level of sexual fun, creativity, and energy, and it's never really going to work. So that can be an issue, and that's possibly one of the reasons. There's quantity and quality. Men watch pornography because they can get sex in quantity that never stops. They don't need to ask for consent. They don't need to do anything other than clicking a button. They get an infinite amount of sex or sexual representations, which to the mind, pornography very much feels like sex. So the mind cannot really tell what's real sex and what's pornography. So as far as the brain is concerned, it's just sex nonstop. So there's the quantity and there's the quality. It's possible as well that your husband may have certain desires that he's not comfortable in sharing with you, maybe some kinks, some things that are a bit extreme that he's learned from extreme pornography, some things that involve other people that he knew you would not be okay with, all sorts of limitations and constraints. Because that's the deal of your relationship. When you two got into a relationship, you both knew that was the contract, and so he's seeking in pornography something that's outside of that contract. So is that something that we can really blame him for? I'm not one to say who's to blame, and I don't really care about judgments and blaming. But if there is blame, is it better to go outside the relationship and break the contract, or is it better to just live a semi-alternate reality in a screen so that the contract of the relationship is not broken? There's no good answer for that. Or that he just represses everything altogether, sticks to the contract, and that he's unhappy in the relationship, or that he finds a way to make himself happy in the relationship with that. These are all the possibilities. So that's one reason why men would go into pornography, and that's because it feels vulnerable for men to come and open up and say, "Hey, I would like to try something. Is that okay with you?" And generally, men very much know exactly what they want, especially if they're watching a lot of pornography. When you're watching a lot of pornography, instead of broadening your sexual horizons into different varieties of sex or different sexual practices or fantasies or types of partners or whatever, what happens is that the sexual behavior is going to niche into a very particular selection of sexual behaviors and preferences, and it's going to stick to that for a lot of men in pornography. So it can feel vulnerable for men to just come up and say, "Hey, I'd like to try that. Is it possible?" Also, because a lot of men do not really know how to do that, and I would advise that this is done kind of in steps, and we go from kissing each other to having sex to bringing a little bit more spice. But we don't go straight into, "I'd like to have a gangbang with 25 people," but to bring steps into that. But men generally don't know how to do that, and they just have this pressure of needing to ask. At first, they don't want to ask because it feels vulnerable, and they may be rejected, which for men, that's one of the worst pains. And they just want a yes or no. So they'll say, "Hey, can we have a gangbang with 25 people?" And oftentimes the answer is going to be no, because that's pretty intense. But if it was done properly and in steps, it would probably be a lot easier. So men just don't talk about all this at all to avoid rejection, and they just go in their little world and they just look for a gangbang of 20 people in pornography. Trigger warning for gangbangs, by the way. This came in way too late. Yes. So that's one of the biggest reasons, quantity and quality of sex. But the second one is just that they need a bit of me time. It's just a way for them to unwind after a long day. Some people watch Netflix. he watches pornography. He could go and debrief about his day with you and talk about what went wrong and blah, blah, blah. But he doesn't do that. Maybe he's not very talkative. He just wants a bit of pleasure, a bit of comfort. And it's happening through pornography. So from there, what can we do? What can we do to be an ally to someone who's addicted to pornography? The very first stance thing is to adopt a non-judgmental stance as much as possible. And of course, not shaming them, not blaming them, but if anything, seeing them for the pain they're going through. The second thing is to possibly have a conversation. In these conversations, it's very likely that your husband is going to get very defensive because it's the little inner child inside them that is watching pornography. I have not explained that. Let me explain that very quickly. Inside us, there is our emotional center, which is our inner child. And when we're suffering from childhood trauma and emotional wounds and things, it is the inner child that takes control and makes us do the things we do. And we're being immature and silly and seeking pleasure instead of being responsible. It's our inner child taking the wheel, instead of the inner parent who's caring about authority and order and meeting the needs met. So when you're going to talk about pornography and maybe have a sit down or something with them, their inner child is going to be very guarded because that's their little object that they use for comfort, and they're going to think that you want to take it away from them, which possibly you do, but before that we want to have a conversation. So expect that they'll be very guarded, and I suggest you have the stance of a very caring parent, a very caring person that's very inoffensive and that is just trying to understand what's happening for them. And as much as you probably want to bring your stuff on the carpet as well and be, I feel so betrayed and I feel this and that, I really invite you to let those feelings not impact the quality of the conversation you can have with your husband, and to deal with that with your psychologist and your friends, and maybe later on with your husband as well. But are you just being very caring and say, hey, I've noticed that lately you're watching a lot of pornography. You can do a bit of nonviolent communication and say, it makes me feel XYZ. It makes me feel a little bit betrayed. It makes me feel insecure. But more importantly, I think this is going to turn into a problem inside that relationship. And out of love for you and for our relationship, I would like that we discuss that. Is it possible? And they may be surprised, or they may be, they will be surprised, and they'll probably be relieved that you're making the first step in that. And they'll be very guarded and probably say yes and say, sure, let's talk about that. And then you can just say, well, I've noticed you watch a lot of pornography these days. I think it's hurtful to our relationship. Do you know what drives you to do that? And is there anything that we can do in our sex life, maybe so are your sexual needs met? Is there anything that I can do to meet your sexual needs better? By the way, you can also talk about your sexual needs, so that if there's a 50-50 dialogue and transaction, it feels more comfortable to them. And then just have the conversation. And it can be that there's going to be 3 outcomes. They're going to say, yes, I have a problem. Thank you for bringing this up. Let's work on this together. Beautiful. They're going to say, this is all bullshit. I don't want to talk about this ever again. Just let me do my thing. You're so controlling. And they'll be too guarded and they're going to close up. So then it's probably a good thing to give them some space and time, maybe a few hours, maybe a few days, maybe a few weeks, and then try again, and to be very soft and caring about it. Or they're going to go and say, you know what, you're absolutely right. my needs are not met. I want this, and that. Our sexuality is boring. Whatever they're gonna say, and then it's probably good to take all this information on board. There are going to be some emotions on your end, on their end. It may explode. Hopefully it doesn't explode. If it explodes, it's fine. It's a way for things to be discussed, and for the information to be transferred in one way or another. And then just close that and say, okay, well, let's talk about that another time. Or, I've heard what you say. Now I've got to move on with my day, but we're going to work on that. So yeah, things might explode and things may not. Depends on both your ability to communicate in a vulnerable and trusted way. And it's very likely that there's going to be this conversation happening several times. But they do not know what they need. For the vast majority, they will not know what they need. So just love and care and compassion goes a long way to get started with that. If you can see them being addicted and still being loving and supportive at the same time, this is probably the biggest thing for them that you can do, and they will feel so loved and alive and tolerated for who they are, and they're given permission to exist in the way they are. This is probably the most beautiful gift that you can give them. Yes. And so once they've come to realize that they have a problem, maybe if they have a problem, maybe maybe your sex life has been spiced up a little bit, or maybe you've come to the realization that, hey, you know what, this is not possible. Like, I can't possibly do the things that you asked me to do. So what's going to happen? Is that going to break the relationship? There's a possibility that your relationship is not going to survive that. This can be absolutely heartbreaking. If the relationship breaks because of a conversation about pornography, it's probably that you were maybe not meant for each other in the first place, because it's a big issue. But if you're coming from two places such that you have such opposing or opposed values about pornography, that, hey, maybe you were not so compatible in the first place. It's a possibility. So maybe think very carefully about engaging in this conversation as well. But for the most part, when relationships break, it's probably a good thing. It's just that things were not supposed to work, and we can move on and find someone with whom we're more compatible. But as much as resolving is engaged, and as much as resolving is the aim of what we're trying to do, I hope that this conversation goes well. And that they're able to move on. So assuming that this conversation goes well, maybe your sex life has been spiced up a little bit, they find more satisfaction, this could be enough. Just to have received that love from you, of being seen in the hurt through what they're going through with pornography, and you forgiving them and getting their needs met. That's the best proof of love that you can give to someone. That's 95% of the work is here. What else do you need than that? And then forgiving people in how they act in their hurt is the ultimate forgiveness and the most beautiful testimony of love. All right. So we talked a lot today. We talked a lot about what you can do if your husband is watching too much pornography. We talked about how it's important to acknowledge your feelings in the first place, so they're not an obstacle to healthy communication with your husband. And so you can actually feel aligned and feel good about where you're standing, and have a bit of clarity about how you feel. And it's important to create the space for you. You're going to initiate this being an ally thing. It's about you. It starts with you. It's about you. Then we saw that it's important to clarify your opinions, values, beliefs about pornography, because you're probably going to project that over your husband. And so to be able to have a neutral conversation, healthy conversation, removing these projections can be helpful. And again, it's also to know where you're speaking from, and to know how much of your contribution you can remove from that issue with pornography as well, if there is any contribution on your end. Then we talked about their context, what they're going through when they're being triggered, the double life sort of thing, the hurt they're going through, the pain, the fact that they would like to heal, but they don't know how, the fact that they love you, and if they could heal, they would, but they just don't know how. All these things to get a bit in context. And finally, what you can do, which is basically acknowledging their suffering and still loving them through what they're going through. And maybe opening a space for sexual expression, discussing fantasies. You wouldn't know the amount of couples that I've talked to who have been together for 5 years, 10 years. They've never had the conversation of what are you into? This is surprising. This is very surprising. This is something you'd like to talk about probably in the first weeks that you're in a relationship, and experiment with sex if you're comfortable with that. It's very surprising that not many people do. Well, no, it's staggering that so many people do, but it's not surprising because it does feel quite vulnerable to open up, and there's a fear of maybe being judged as well. So offering that space to your husband, talking about your sexual needs to give them a chance to talk about their sexual needs could very well be the solution to that issue. But just keeping the care and love that you have for them, while acknowledging what's going through in your relationship, and telling them that, hey, the reason why you're having this hard conversation is to save the relationship. Is because pornography has starting to impact the relationship, and you love him and he loves you. And so you want the relationship to be saved. And so you're doing this hard work that you've undertaken by yourself by watching a YouTube video on your own to save your relationship. That's ultimately the goal. All right. So what can your husband do concretely if the spicing your sex life thing does not work? Then it's important that they start finding professional help. It's probably time to look into neurodiversity, to look into stress levels, to look into unresolved trauma. Again, the biggest factor in creating addiction in my perspective, and the most ignored. So I've created a website called Unhooked.care, which is an online clinic for pornography addiction, where we do all the therapy that I have gone through myself and all my clients to heal from this pornography addiction. There's nothing obvious about pornography addiction, and there is so much confusion. So before your husband can do anything, he's welcome to educate himself and realize what's happening for him, have his questions answered. So I've created a Mythbuster course that you can join right here. And if the Mythbuster course is making him happy, then he's welcome to go and have a look at Unhooked.care, the online clinic, the online therapy clinic I've created for pornography addiction. Thank you. Have a great day.